What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
What kind of ignorant shit is that?
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
You idiot, you fool!
Hey, dummy!
This is the Ignorance is Blessed podcast.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
Hey, idiots. Welcome back to Ignorance is Blessed. I am excited for my guest today. It's the incredible Joe Trigilio. You guys probably maybe don't know him.
Probably not.
He's, if you remember my episode with Angelina Spicer, a hilarious comedian, great friend of mine. Am I not supposed to say this part? You a secret? No one can know who White Bay is.
Yes.
And she'll be back too. This is her husband, and he does. That sounds so dumb. He does really cool shit. Joe is a public defender.
Former
public defender, excuse me, and now the executive director.
Correct.
Of Loyola's Project for the Innocent.
That's right.
Yes. And really quickly give me, and then we're going to dive in, but your executive director, what is the Loyola's Project for the Innocent?
We are a clinic at Loyola Law School that is doing our best to get folks out of prison who are wrongfully convicted and trying to change some laws in the process.
Damn. That's really fucking cool.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, it's important work. It's been really exciting since I've joined.
It's not just Kim Kardashian out there, you guys.
She's been great though.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we can talk about that. But
okay, great. Oh yeah, it probably
force.
has put a spotlight on this exact type thing.
Yeah.
So prior to this, you were a public defender.
Federal public defender, which is a little different than the county level.
Oh, really? Yeah. I'm like, wait, how does that even work?
Yeah, I didn't even know they existed when I even went to law school. But yeah, federal public defender for 15 years, and then transitioned over to this role. I've been teaching for a while now, and it was kind of a natural.
Just kind
move
of
into the law school.
Okay. So you said you didn't even know it was a thing when you went to law school. When you went to law school, did you know what you wanted to do? Or were you just like, I'm pretty good at analyzing stuff and logicking my way in conversations. I'll do something.
Yeah. No, I'm one of the rare ones who did go in with a very specific purpose.
Really?
Yeah, I'm from Texas, and I grew up seeing folks or hearing about folks getting executed. Capital punishment in Texas is a big deal.
Oh yeah.
And literally every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday when I was like in high school and college, there would be executions happening.
Really?
Yeah, and it was. I'm like, what is this? And I was on the basketball team and kind of going in the sports route, but then hearing about this, and like, this is fucked up. So I started a group to try to fight that from happening.
So it originally started as like, get rid of the death penalty.
Get rid of the death penalty, and that's what drove me to law school. Is just individually representing these folks on death row
and wanting to
fight that system, the capital punishment. And so I went to law school with that specific purpose, went to a law school that had a program that sent us to the South to work on those cases. And my first job at a law school was a place up in the Bay that just represents folks on death row challenging their convictions. And so it's been really the death penalty wars that had me in the law. And I did the same work at the federal public defender as well.
Whoa. Okay. So like in a role like that, where you're like, does every person who's on death row get their case like relooked at before?
Yes and yes.
Like, do they go, let's just do one last check?
This is where it gets. California is just broken. They should. Yes, everyone on death row and uniquely to death row inmates, they get a right to a lawyer not only at trial but in their post-conviction stuff. So there's an appeal where you look at stuff that went wrong at the trial, and then there's something called habeas corpus, where you can look at sort of what really happened and did the jury really get it right. And that's where you litigate things like maybe he's innocent, or maybe the police hid stuff, or maybe his lawyer was doing drugs at the time of the trial and didn't do a good enough job. That's all called habeas proceedings.
Okay.
And usually most inmates don't get a lawyer to look at all that stuff. If you get sentenced to life without parole, for example, or 50 years, you're done. You have to do all that stuff on your own in your jail cell. But if you were sentenced to death, statutes, federal and state statutes give you a right to a lawyer.
Yeah, they're like, we don't care if you're in here doing free labor for the rest of your life. But if
No.
we're gonna kill you, we better.
We're going to kill you. We want to feel a little bit more comfortable
We
with
want to feel
ourselves.
justified in our murder.
Exactly. But if you're sentenced to die in prison, that's the different thing. But
Yeah.
sentenced to death, yes, you get a lawyer. That can take decades to get for you. You could be
Really?
sitting in California, we have the largest death row, over 700 people.
Really?
So it could take, and there's not enough lawyers to do this stuff. So it can take a decade before a guy who was sentenced to death gets a lawyer to look at his case.
Is this like, because it's public defenders who get,
It would first
Unless
go
they
to,
have-
they first go to a state agency.
Okay.
And hopefully they would step in. But that's one state agency that does this type of stuff. And then it
Yikes.
goes to private lawyers who are part of like a panel who are qualified to take big capital cases.
Oh,
And it's very small compared to the number of people on death row.
that's
And so it's just the delay for these guys, which means witnesses are dying, documents are getting destroyed, exhibits
things
are
go
getting-
missing.
Things go missing.
Shocking.
But I was working at the federal level. So if in California, if you get sentenced to death here in Los Angeles, at
Yeah.
a trial here
Like,
in LA
how does
County,
that work?
you lose. So you lose at trial, you appeal, you lose your appeal. You have a chance to challenge your conviction in the California Supreme Court. If you lose
Okay.
there, you can then go into federal court.
So
Our
you're
office would
working
come
with
in-
3-time losers.
3-time losers.
And they're like, get Joe on the case.
Yeah. We go into federal court, and
Fuck.
the federal laws really has gotten progressively worse, but we have resources, fortunately, at the federal defender's office to really do, a lot of times the first time, a real investigation of the case.
Like you guys can get through doors that maybe other people couldn't.
We can afford
We can make some cones.
experts. We can afford traveling and talking to folks, and we have just folks who know what they're doing
Yeah.
and can actually expose some of this evidence and try to
Wow.
litigate it again. So that was my work for the past 15 years, which is kind of similar to what the Innocence Project is doing.
Is for.
Is for, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, this is just like my ignorance about like being a lawyer or like in that capacity, especially. As a lawyer, is your job as a defender to like assume innocence?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's not. I'm saying, yeah, I'm great. That's a tricky question.
Like, are there cases where you're like, come on, guys. I don't want this guy to die.
What I
Can we
will
just
say-
find a way to change
Yeah.
the sentence here?
As a public defender, we get appointed to any case. I
Yeah.
represented for a little bit the Night Stalker. One of the most, like,
Oh my God.
we get appointed to anybody. And I can tell you from experience with that, from every single death penalty case, there's going to be things that are happening that are just fucked up and crazy.
Yeah.
And
you're
unfair.
finding a way to be like, how do I frame
And
this?
you don't get a death sentence unless there's something something went wrong. And I truly believe that, because I believe that jurors, if they know who the person really is, they might not let the guy out. They might say he's innocent. He might be guilty of sin. But the question of the death penalty is this person redeemable enough to not kill?
Yeah.
Is there something in there that makes them a human being worthy of just living in prison for the rest of their life? Or are they just complete irredeemable monsters? And my experience is there's always something that explains, not justifies.
It doesn't justify, but it's like
explains why someone is so messed up in the brain
humanizes them,
to
basically.
potentially do that. Yeah, humanizes. And that doesn't happen at death penalty trials that result in convictions or death sentences.
Yeah, that it's like,
And so there is, to answer your question about innocence, it's not, sometimes it is guilt innocence. Sometimes it's they didn't do it. But many other times, maybe they did it, but the jury didn't really hear who this person was as a human being.
yeah, so like yes, they deserve to be found guilty, but they are not an irredeemable.
Exactly. And they, exactly. And
Monster to the
life
point that
would
they
have been a more appropriate.
Yeah, where it's like,
punishment.
this isn't someone who. That's a wild thing to even.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just a dumb question, but I guess that's the
No.
whole premise of the show. I hate when it's obvious that it's like some of the listeners might be wondering, and it's like, no, it's me, I'm dumb. Does the jury decide the sentence, or is that the judge?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It used to, sometimes in the South, some judges would be the ones who did it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like The Night the Lights Went Out
Yeah.
in Georgia by Reba McEntire, where the judge is like, he's guilty, hang him.
Used to be the case. No, now it is the juries who decide the case, and they are supposed to be. So, if you want me to tell you the process? Is it?
Oh,
might be
I
kinda
think
boring.
so. No, I mean, I
Um,
think it's really interesting.
So the way it works is,
I'm just
I
kidding.
know someone gets found guilty of a crime.
Yeah.
It goes to a separate it's called a punishment phase or penalty phase.
Okay.
Whole new trial, basically. Same jury.
Which is basically like they are guilty. Now this phase
now we're
is-
going to decide what the penalty is.
Yeah.
And
Did
you
it like a
have to have a
precedent?
jury who's open to the death penalty.
You
in
have
order
to be-
sit in that. Like a juror, in order to sit for a penalty phase, has to already have been open to it. Which
So you're saying I can get out of jury duty by going, just want you to know I am
Never-
absolutely against the death penalty.
yes, you can get out of a death penalty case. by
Look at this
saying
guy.
that.
He pretended to be racist.
Um,
What an idiot.
But imagine who that excludes from the jury pool of who's deciding these.
People who would probably
40% or
That's
more
fucking wild.
of black people are against the death penalty because they see the impact
of innocent
of
people.
over policing in their communities.
Of course.
they're not going to serve on these juries because they're against the death penalty.
So then your jury of peers.
It's called death qualified. It's a death qualified jury you have who's
that
primed.
sucks.
So you have that, but the jury then hears from the prosecutor why your murder is extra bad, basically. Why this one is not just a simple first degree murder, but one that's a little worse.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons.
That this person can't even be around other criminals.
It was committed because lying in wait or in the course of something else. Or there's 22 things in California that make a murder worse. And then they hear that, and then they should be hearing from the defense anything that mitigates the crime or that makes explains maybe didn't go down the way they said it went down, or anything about the person's life history that sort of puts his
makes you
conduct
go,
in a.
Okay.
If I had a client
Severely
who was
abused.
yeah,
right.
who was forced to sell heroin by his mother since the age of 7, overdosed on barbiturates at the age of 12, kicked out of his home, joined a gang. You might understand why that person has a lack of impulse control when you do a neuropsych test
Yeah.
and see they don't have the ability
Because
to.
they frazzled their brain.
They've
Trauma plus drugs.
all
plus-
that, and the jury needs to hear all that when deciding, and then they weigh everything. It's a really fuzzy process, but they're supposed to weigh everything and decide. Do we kill this guy or do we let him live and die in prison, basically?
I just think that it's so shitty that I feel like public or just defense attorneys in general get shit on for like they could be representing criminals when there's someone out there who's a prosecutor going, and here's why they should definitely die.
Yeah, I mean, I'm used to the comments.
I
The sleazy,
mean,
but they're really it's one of the most rewarding moments when I can step into the Ninth Circuit or the federal court, and they all have to listen to my client's story.
you're like, no,
Who
you're gonna,
everyone hates. And I think that's part of what I love about the job, or I loved about the job. It's a different job at the Innocence Project.
Yeah.
Whole different way of thinking.
But for that, it's like
But for that, it's
showing,
like-
shining a light on.
And it's like, no, someone's finally going to stand up for this guy who everybody just has thrown away and just thinks is just the worst
Garbage
of the worst.
and is-
garbage, and saying like, no, there's a story here. There's some dignity in there.
There's a human inside that person.
And making the system pause for a little bit and listen to it.
Yeah.
And we lose a lot. But if we can give them, my client, a sense that like, okay, well, you
Somebody
listened to that
cared.
and fought and spoke to the power with that message. I mean, that
I mean,
means a
that's
lot.
huge to just.
And it's like,
It's also for someone who like, you've got to assume, obviously there are the rare, just complete psychopath. I would never say anyone's irredeemable, but like,
yeah.
there are people that maybe you go, well, that's just the wiring was just never good from the start. I don't know, but like
a lot of training on that I've been to. Is psychopathy a real thing? It's a whole other
that's a whole.
it's
I
kind
would
of a
love to make a
pseudo.
whole
It's
podcast.
kind of a pseudoscience. This whole notion of psychopathy versus
Oh, it feels like a
you got a bunch
write
of
off.
yeah, you got a bunch of true crime folks who write about psychopathy as like this checklist.
Yeah,
it's-
and you're
it's
just a
total
drunk
garbage.
housewife.
Total garbage.
He's like, trust me, I watched
Yeah.
Eternity Dateline. Some of these people just don't
It's
feel
like,
a
yes,
thing. It's
exactly.
like, well, if they didn't feel a thing, they wouldn't enjoy murdering people. So how do you, okay, just
It's like how we talk about narcissism now. Everyone's a narcissist.
it's like, yes, some people. It's also sometimes they're human and had like a bad moment.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they're dude. The way people will throw around narcissism,
Or just like the lingo now. Everyone's kind of knows
using
therapy,
these therapy
and using
talk.
same thing. Psychopath. So I have that always gets me when I hear psychopathy because
And
I've
you
had
think-
clients who've been alleged to have been, and they're definitely damaged, not innocent, but
So are you of the mindset? Are you of the belief that like there is no one that is like
I haven't come across that
you
yet,
haven't yet?
of someone who is just
The way media paints the
what's the
Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy, who's the guy
Dahmer.
Hopkins The movie.
Hannibal.
It's a guy like
There's no Hannibal Lecter.
who's just this stone cold killer. Because the worst guys I've represented have real significant stuff going on in their brains.
Yeah, that you like
are like, okay, you are messed up and this
Yeah.
is bad. You don't need to be out in the world, but this is not just
because you're a
being-
danger. It's the same as that. Like
Yeah.
some people just end up in psych wards because they're dangerous.
Totally.
And like, yeah. I guess you don't go. No, he grew up in a nice suburb where his parents tucked him in
Yeah.
every night, and then he just started murdering people.
Exactly.
There were no signs.
No signs. Exactly. You don't see that. So
That's wow. I mean, how great that like you're able to just at least like shine a light on that story. I lost my train of thought just thinking about the idea of Hannibal having like a perfect childhood and then just being like, well, time to put on the mask.
that's a prequel. Yeah. Exactly.
That's a prequel. It's just a coming of age story. It's a beautiful indie film. My stepdad was mean to me once. He yelled at me. I never recovered.
Exactly.
You're like, and then this happened? Have there been people that you like fully have there been like you gotten like fully like innocent people?
On death row?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been able to been really lucky to represent two men who were on death row and have seen them walk them off of death row, are out in the world now. One guy in Texas, he was
Whoa.
7 days away from getting executed.
And what I mean, I don't know.
Clint Young, he is out in the world now, and he was got his case in our office. Got his case back in 2010. He was. You want to hear the whole story?
I do. If you can tell me the story, I want to hear
It's
this
a wild
story.
story.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Wild story. He was from a small town in East Texas,
Okay.
and with three other guys, they were all on drugs, on meth at the time.
Classic
He was
Texas.
18. Other people were older. They kidnapped somebody in a car. The guy in the car got killed, got shot by one of those guys.
Whoa.
They took the car all the way to Eastland, Texas, which is like in the middle of the state by the Panhandle.
Oh yeah.
Kidnapped another truck, somebody, shot that guy. So two dead bodies, and went to Midland, Texas, where the
Really with the
birthplace
names?
of George Bush.
Yeah.
And stopped there. So my client was tried in Midland for both of the murders. And what happened was the three other men all went to the police first and pointed the
and
finger
blamed him.
at my client.
They all decided we're just gonna blame that guy.
We're going to blame that guy. And that's where, and really what happens in these cases, not just their decision. Police oftentimes get tunnel vision and get cued in on a suspect and really locked in on our client.
and they can't like let go.
It's hard to let go, and they don't see other evidence.
It's
and
like bias
it primes
almost.
them. It's total bias. But these accomplices all pointed the finger at Clint Young. He gets sentenced to death in 2001.
Did those guys get anything?
One guy got no charges. One guy got 30 years. The other guy got 15 years.
What?
Yeah. So and as a result of their testimony, right? And so the first problem, the reason we first stopped an execution was the prosecution gave those guys plea agreements that they didn't tell the jury about, right? So that was the first thing that stopped the
Whoa.
execution. But we didn't get the conviction overturned because the courts in the federal court and state court were like, well, so what? It didn't matter. It wouldn't have changed the jury's mind even if they hadn't known about these deals, right? So we
Yeah.
lost that. That's when he got within a week of being executed, which was just a really, to get that close to that process is
death?
just
I mean-
disgusting. I mean, because you have to talk to your client about where do you want your body and what do you want to wear and what do you want your family to do with your stuff.
What
And
is the method of death penalty? then?
it's just lethal injection.
Okay.
So
I
it's
didn't know if
just
they still had anything else that I just didn't know.
yeah,
about.
they don't have anything.
Okay.
So it's just like it's just a awful and
It's terrible.
when they seek an execution like that, the system just it's like an avalanche. It just rolls downhill, and the momentum nobody wants to stop it.
Yeah.
But
Oh.
fortunately, we were able to develop a ton of evidence through. We found people who were in the jail cell with one of the accomplices, who heard the accomplice admit to the
Admit
shooting
to it.
and acknowledge lying. Got hold of 4 of those people and got their statements and presented that. We got gunshot residue testing on that accomplice's gloves that showed he had gunshot residue all over those gloves.
I can't believe they hadn't done that.
Well, right? Exactly. So we get all of that. That stopped that execution from happening. So his life was saved for a period of time.
Yeah.
Within that period of time, while we were going to litigate those claims and present that evidence in court, we got a call at like 9 o'clock at night one night, like a random when I was gearing up for the hearing.
Oh, guilty conscience call.
Yeah, Angelina was in the room with it.
Who the hell are you on the phone
We
with?
got a
this
call
hour?
from the prosecutor in Midland, Texas, who was like, the main defender, the main prosecutor, the elected lady, was looking at some personnel files, and we realized there might be a problem. It turns out one of the prosecutors at my client's trial, so prosecuting my client,
Yeah.
was moonlighting as a clerk for the judge, the trial judge, and writing the trial judge's orders and working for the court, making decisions against my client at night, writing these orders while he's a prosecuting
Which
my
is a
client during
conflict
the
of
day.
interest.
I
in
mean,
a
big
big way.
time,
Yeah.
huge.
That
And
like hurt my neck for something.
yeah,
like
it was. And so that got exposed first. I think the only time that's happened in the country, and
Jesus.
became.
You got to wonder how much it's gone on and just hasn't been exposed.
in these little towns, right? But
Oh,
even
yeah.
that was shocking. So the Texas Court of Appeal, Criminal Appeal, which rarely does it, overturn its conviction at that point with that evidence.
Like they were just like, no.
This is not. He needs a new trial. So our guy got out on bond, so he's out.
He's out.
Working, doing his thing.
How long had he been in prison?
Since
up to that?
2000 to 2000. It was over COVID. I remember writing his petition in my living room because of COVID.
Over
It was like a
COVID.
Zoom hearing, cross-examining folks on fucking
On
Zoom.
a screen.
So it was 20 years. I guess he was on the row. And then my other client, Barry Williams, who's going to be coming to speak at Loyola, spent 41 years on death row.
41
I was
years.
2 years old when he got arrested. Total wrongful conviction. Evidence falsified by the police, by the DA.
Where's is he
material
also
withheld.
Texas or
No,
somewhere
here in
else?
California.
You're in California. Okay.
Yeah. So that was the second guy that was on the row and got off.
Damn.
Crazy.
I mean, I wonder what it's like to bounce back from. I mean, that's a fucking
40 years. He's doing great. I mean,
Good.
yeah.
And he's coming to speak. Like
He's
do
coming to
those-
talk on October 2nd.
Do a lot of
at
people
Loyola.
in that position sort of get involved in this?
Yeah, it's meaningful for them to.
Yeah.
It's that's a real. That's a.
I'm sure it's.
And it's so weird for me when I started of like, man, just getting them out as I viewed that as the end. But man, the challenge for these guys starts when they get out. Like I gotten a number of guys who have not had death sentences and picking them up from prison, and they're just like taking them to the beach for the first time, or
Wow,
like
this. Like
everything is new, and there's so many choices to go
And
look
the
at a
world
fast
is
food
different.
menu. They don't have any options in prison, and so to have a choice of what I want to eat,
and they're like,
where
where
I
the
want to
fuck
go,
is the dollar menu? No.
yeah, totally. It's mind blowing what they have to go through to get adjusted. You know,
Damn. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
like a level of rehabilitating.
totally.
Damn, it's like putting a animal in captivity back out in the wild. That's not to call people animals.
That-
But I mean, it's just
wouldn't
such
use
a
that
different.
analogy.
Yeah. Yikes. Oh, whoops. You just it's life in captivity. Okay. Well,
There
I mean,
you
it
go.
works. Damn, that's crazy. I mean, that had to feel wild for you, just being like, and like, was there a point in those cases where you were like before they got like fully turned over that you were like, fuck, I think this person is innocent.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's you get clues that the prosecution got it wrong. I mean, I guess this goes back to your question. As a public defender, I'm not going to ask my client, "Are you innocent or not?"
Yeah,
It is irrelevant to me
you're like, I
when
have
I'm
a job
appointed
to
to
do.
a case.
What is the evidence?
What's the evidence exactly? And
Yeah.
and did you get a fair trial? It's
Yeah.
not up to me to make decisions about guilt or innocence.
Yeah,
It's
well,
up to me to
especially-
like expose some stuff that went wrong
Yeah, be like,
and
you-
stuff that the jury should have heard.
Yeah.
The Innocence Project, however, that's fundamental to know whether our client's innocent. And
Yeah,
it's a totally different thing. But
be
as
like,
a-
before we come in and help you,
yes, exactly.
did you do it?
Did you do it? And do I
I'm
believe
like,
you?
"Well."
Yeah, it's a mind shift. But no, I didn't. I wasn't thinking guilt or innocence. I was thinking there's something
Where the
that went
issue in the
wrong
system.
here.
Yeah.
And it could mean you're innocent, but that's not my
That's not my. I'm not the jury. My
I'm
job
not-
is to show the flaws in the.
totally that they
trial.
hid stuff, they falsified stuff. The implications of which mean you're innocent, right? So-
Damn. Well, what happens? So in a case that like, I mean, what happened to that prosecutor that was working for the judge? Like, does that
He
Did
got
they just-
disbarred.
good?
Rare to have that happen. It was just that
Really?
is just so egregious.
Do sometimes they just go, well, whoops.
Well, in Barry Williams's case, there was a bar complaint based on what came out.
Yeah.
And I think a trial, like a full like proceeding to
Yeah.
disbar him. And he ended up winning that trial, I guess,
What
the
the
prosecutor, because too much time had passed.
Oh, statute of limitations.
No,
or-
it was the whole claim was he hid evidence, but too much time had passed to prove that he really knowingly hid the evidence.
But he's like, I might have misplaced the evidence.
or
Like he was
like,
like just couldn't like without guilty with.
which is the biggest irony about so
Oh,
much time
oh,
has passed. My client was in prison for 40 years.
Yeah.
Like that's
Oh, we
shows
can't
how
prove that
egregious
you're
it is.
guilty beyond reasonable doubt, but he wasn't even guilty.
He wasn't even guilty. So that didn't happen. And it's very hard to hold up prosecutors accountable. And this Texas case was just so crazy. He got disbarred. There's suits flying around, lawsuits flying around. and
What
stuff,
also
so.
sucks because I imagine that like for that guy who didn't get disbarred, it's not like he has to wear a scarlet letter. Like you don't know that you're about to get a lawyer who should have been disbarred, and that sucks for you.
That's right.
You're like, or maybe I guess
That's
I guess it doesn't if he's just willing to do shady shit and you're trying to get off the hook.
That's right.
But that's
Yeah.
I always think about that with doctors and stuff where it's like, I mean, you
Malpractice.
passed med school, but how do I know you didn't get a bunch of seats?
I know.
Like this.
Well, if you go to the State Bar website, you can actually see if someone has been disciplined. But it means you
Really?
have to have been disciplined. But if you look up an attorney, you can see like
Oh, that's good to know.
their history. Yeah.
I just
a
think
little tip. If
there's
you
probably
ever-
some people who are like, I'm looking for someone who's been disciplined a few times. Some mob
willing
boss.
to play the game. Yeah.
Get a
exactly.
little crazy in there.
Exactly.
Damn. Okay, so like the transition over to, I mean, it seems like a pretty natural transition over to the Project for the Innocent, but like, how did you start specifically getting involved with them? Like, what did that look like?
Well, a lot of it was just teaching. I love
Okay.
to teach, and so I started teaching at the law school.
What did you teach specifically?
I teach habeas corpus litigation. So it's
Ooh,
students.
fun.
I know.
Hey,
and-
this is paperwork at a high level.
And no, it sounds that way.
No,
But it's actually
It's
really
very
fascinating.
important.
I mean,
it sounds really
I
fascinating.
think it's really. I love the topic. I think it's really.
No, I mean, I
exciting.
love law.
It's all about investigating and talking to folks and stuff. So I taught that, and then I would supervise students. I was like an adjunct professor there, supervising students on a couple cases
oh, that's cool.
for a while. So that's how I had a relationship with the project coming in.
Okay, and
Yeah.
then
Just made the switch full time.
I mean, it seems like you're the guy for the job.
I have a good relationship with them and a good relationship with some of the folks on the other side that we have to deal with a lot. And
Yeah.
it
So
worked
like,
out.
what like in terms of like what like the project actually helps do? I imagine it's a lot of like, in my mind, like liaison, like connecting people to these resources. But like, what actually is kind of like the day-to-day work of helping exonerate these people?
Yeah, it's a real resource intensive. We're always looking for resources and help. And
Classic nonprofit.
Right, exactly.
I was in a
No,
nonprofit
it's
before
totally-
comedy.
It's so true.
We are horny for resources.
The fundraising that has to happen, but it's
The golf tournaments never
you
end.
know, it can be as much as 700 letters a year of inmates writing to us
Wow.
for help.
Oh.
And so a big part of the job is screening. It's called screening those letters and seeing, is this person alleging innocence? Is there something to it? And so that's where the students come in and help. Like, what
They kind of
did he
examine
do and what
the case has
what it's
done
about and what can we look for and can we help this person?
And is that at all like, so previously you were doing like death row, but is this more than just death row? Is it?
We don't do capital cases. They're too big. So these are people who, and plus they have lawyers.
Yeah.
We do
This is
cases.
California.
Yeah, lower than So mostly murders because they have a long sentence.
So you got time.
They got time, and exactly. And it could take a long time to get to them after they write to us because we have so many to get to.
Wow.
But we then send them a questionnaire about information about their case, and students will pitch it to us, and then we will sometimes go and investigate. So like they're little mini murder mysteries,
and students have to pitch. So it's like
We
like
do
a
it-
development meetings where people are
Oh,
here's a
totally.
TV show idea I have. But then someone's like, all right, I got this guy. Family's dead.
You're joking. That's exactly how it works.
People, and then you go, which one? Okay, we're gonna take a really quick break, and then we're gonna come back and talk more about this because this is interesting to me. Okay, before the break, I made a bit of a joke, but it's not a joke about like people pitching, like the sort of the cases that come in.
Yeah.
So what do you look for in terms of how you prioritize? Like, is it like who seems like they have the best evidence to like
Mhm.
help get them out, or is it a compelling case? Does it benefit the person who wrote the letter if a person who's really good at giving speeches happens to be like, are there people who are just really good at pitching?
Yeah, so it's not about the pitch. That's more of an educational thing for the students to
Okay.
like get on their feet and talk.
Yeah, because
The
as a
whole
lawyer,
process,
you're gonna
the whole process we are supervising and walking
Yeah.
through from the very beginning
Okay.
what they're looking at.
Yeah.
So we kind of know the case by the time they pitch it anyway.
Yeah. It's just sort of like, okay, you
Yeah.
do your little pitch.
No,
I'm just kidding. This is fucking
but what
brilliant law
but what
students. And I'm
they
like, do your little your little law thing.
what it's great is students aren't as cynical and jaded as lawyers can be. And so
Yeah.
they see possibilities where I might not see them. Where I'm like,
Wow.
oh boy, yeah, whatever. This
You're
guy
like, oh, you
did
still
this.
have hope.
Yes, exactly. Or like, oh, well, maybe the police were just lying here, or maybe it really was. This evidence was planted, which sounds crazy to me, but no, the evidence gets planted.
We have seen that happen.
And they're like, it's students that remind me of that all the time. Of like,
there could be more to this.
what's actually push a little harder on this, Joe. Like, don't be so down on the claim or
Come
whatever
on,
it is.
Grandpa.
Yeah, exactly. And so they do
Wow.
that. But what we are looking for is there avenues for us to develop evidence? Is there forensic science
Yeah. Can
in your
anything
case
be done?
that we could challenge?
Okay.
Some cases, sadly, it's the only surviving witness won't talk to us and says, "Screw you." I
hate
rest
them.
with what I said at trial.
Yeah.
In which case,
there's nothing
what
else
can
you
we do? And it's unfortunate and sad.
Yeah, because it's like you'd like to
Um,
help everyone.
But is there new evidence? That's what we're looking for. Is there new evidence? And is there plausibly some way that it would fit within a claim, like a constitutional claim? That's what we're looking for.
Okay.
And prioritizing is really tough. It's really,
Because it's not black and white. You know what I mean? It's
yeah. And we try to get to folks who wrote to us years ago and work our way up.
Try to just like chronologically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But stuff falls. Like we're looking now at certain gang detectives and certain evidence of corrupt policing and that leading to wrongful convictions and
Yeah.
gang expert testimony. So sometimes it's the focus of the project too.
Yeah, it's like, oh, what is like the angle that we didn't look into?
Yeah,
or like,
exactly. And some projects,
or maybe things arise do things ever arise because of another case? Like
all the time.
where you go, wait, this could be pertinent to.
You're so smart questioning. Like that's exactly what is happening.
Yeah, I took the LSAT.
No, it's totally like that's exactly.
And then I was like, I'm gonna be a clown.
Like, oh, this guy is showing up over and over and over again, or this problem is happening over and over and over again. So we need to maybe look deeper at these cases.
yeah, there's a pattern
Yeah.
here. So
And
maybe
we use them. It really leads to legislative reform. Like our clinic has been a part of for the past 7 years. Like I think it's like 11 bills that have been passed to amend the law to allow us to do our work better.
really
California's been really active. Yeah.
Can you tell me about some of those?
Yeah, of course. There's one is an eyewitness identification bill that requires police departments to engage in certain practices to try to limit misidentifications.
Okay.
Huge. That went into effect in 2020.
Oh yeah, because someone would be like, it was that
Yeah.
guy.
One was expanded what's false testimony against someone to include like false expert opinions based on forensic science. So a real recognition of how junk science causes wrongful convictions and giving us a way where the law didn't before, a way to challenge convictions based on just bogus science, like
Yeah,
bite mark evidence or something. And that's been
So,
debunked.
signatures. I can read
Handwriting.
Yeah, what are some of those actually?
Gunshot residue is a big one. Serology can be
What is serology?
science of fluids, bodily fluids.
Jizzology.
Yes. This is your last.
That was my previous career.
There we go.
I was a jizzologist, but it really
Yeah, hair fiber stuff, like anything where you're comparing bullet casings with what got fired from a gun. Anytime one dude is subjectively comparing an item at a scene to, our suspect, that raises, I won't joke science is disparaging, but it raises issues of reliability because science is about having a
Facts.
hypothesis,
Yeah.
confirming it, experimenting it, and trying to disprove it. Forensic science is the opposite. Forensics is, I want to get an answer, black and white.
So trying to work backwards from a thing and
Boom.
create a science around it.
Yeah,
almost.
don't disprove it because the jury is going to make the answer, and so it's completely opposite of what science should be, and so it leads to a lot of subjectivity.
So a lot of forensics and a lot of the things we see, on TV of.
Leads to wrongful convictions. Yeah,
Okay, so-
100%. But that's been a law change as well. So,
But
that's
there's some like gun residue.
yeah, I
so-
mentioned gunshot residue earlier.
You
That's
did mention gunshot residue.
here's where the
earlier.
junk science is.
Get Barry. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, this could get a little off tangent, but the reason gunshot residue can be junk science is because there's 3 different particles that make up gunshot residue.
Ah.
And lead, barium, and something else I don't remember. But you
Barium, I hardly shot him.
You could,
Okay,
but you can
sorry.
find those in things like a brake pad.
So it could be something
It
else.
could be something else.
Like there's nothing. There are things in like bullet residue that aren't firmly only part of guns.
That and whether if you fire a gun, it's not guaranteed that gunshot residue will get on you at all.
Yeah.
We did a test fire of a 22 and no gunshot residue was on a glove.
Okay.
Who knows? And police departments and police cars have gunshot residue
They're
all
covered
around
in
them.
gunshot
They're
residue.
covered in it because the cops
Yeah,
go
that's
test fire.
what I would think too. So you're like, well,
So things can get cross-transferred. So the limits of what you can say about GSR on a piece of evidence is that it was exposed to gunpowder,
at
or
some
it was,
point, yeah.
or it was exposed to something that was exposed to gunpowder.
Yeah.
Not that
A gun was fired.
suspect shotgun.
Yeah.
And that's where the
That's leading.
where you
I
have
don't know what
experts
that is.
tell a jury, oh, there's gunshot residue. He shot the gun. That's where the
Yeah.
junk part comes in.
All you can do is go, we found residue that could be from a gun.
And
basically.
here are all the other things that it could be from.
Yeah.
So
Is that when someone, okay, so with that being like a changing law, does someone who brings up something like gunshot residue, are they legally obligated now to go, here are other things that could, or is it just like the freedom of the other lawyer to go, just so you guys know?
it's unfortunately, I mean, the law hasn't totally caught up to the science. And so at the
Okay.
trial level, it's pretty much the same. What the new laws have helped us do and that the Innocence Project helped us pass, it's easier for us to challenge those convictions.
Okay, to like
after the
build a case
fact.
against
Exactly.
that evidence.
Based on sort of emerging disputes or,
Okay.
or when the expert sometimes themselves admits like, oh yeah, I wouldn't have done that today. It gets repudiated, which happens sometimes.
Like,
So-
oh, the expert,
Yeah.
turns out, was just a guy named Daryl
was just
who
yeah.
was really into guns.
Totally. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a dentist, right, who testified about bite marks in a famous case called, Bill Richards was the name of the guy who was exonerated. But the testimony at trial was this dentist who was like, oh, that's a bite mark. And
Thank you.
only 1 to 2% of the population, in my experience, have this weird teeth problem.
Certain
And this client has a tooth problem. Therefore, it's this guy's bite mark.
that guy was paid off.
Completely made up.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's insane.
it was dogs that probably bit him, but he just made up that 1 to 2% figure, and
it's like,
he
how on earth
lost.
would you know that?
I know, how on earth would you know it? But his case ultimately lost because the court was like, well, it's just an expert, it's not false, it's just opinion, and the jury could have figured it out. The legislature stepped in and passed a law overruling that case essentially.
I feel like,
And-
yeah, if you present someone as an expert, that's like falsifying to the jury this person.
totally.
You're going, like, you say someone's an expert, you're going to trust. It's the same as I'll say this for the rest of my life. A stranger in a white coat could finger you in an OBGYN's office. And you'd be like, that wasn't the doctor? They had a white coat on.
That's
it's
right.
like, there's things that your brain just goes, okay, well, then I trust what
I'm
you
going
say.
to credit this guy. It's
Yeah.
exactly.
That's so insane. Bite marks. Get fucked. Or whatever. Thank you for your service. Who knows? For the Project for Innocence, so it's a lot of students, but are you guys ever looking to bring on like lawyers, or like in terms of like resources and how you're trying to grow? Obviously, if I know anything about nonprofits, the main thing is donate money.
100%.
But are you like,
We are hiring a staff attorney now.
okay,
So anybody who's
are you an
work with the
attorney? Are you
project.
with something like that? Because it's a nonprofit, is a staff attorney then? Because I think of nonprofits from the perspective, my lens is like, I worked in PR.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, so you go to a nonprofit and it's in the name, like you're not here for the money. So then are you in theory looking for an attorney who cares more about the cause than about,
That's anybody in this line of work, generally,
Yeah.
nonprofit or otherwise.
is that what makes it hard to find? Like,
Yeah.
what causes the backup? 'Cause it's a lot of lawyers are like, I'm not here because I care.
Yeah, but there's a lot of lawyers who do. So
Okay,
that there is
thank
a lot
God.
of folks who are in it for the right
For the right
reasons.
reasons.
So it's finding that combination of, that's a given that we're going to find someone who's passionate. If you don't have that passion, it's not going to sustain you
Yeah.
with the salary we can offer.
Yeah, you have to love what you do and care about
Yeah.
the people.
It's just what it's hard to find is someone with the experience to go into court and do the writing. The
Yeah.
writing is hard, but it's most of what we do is, in writing.
Yeah, so
And
it's just a lot of
yeah, so you have to be a good storyteller, and that's hard to find.
A storyteller with a law degree.
With a law degree. But what we're
Well,
doing,
I'm out.
But it's all narratives. That's
Yeah.
what we teach is like, is what's the prosecution's narrative? How do we tell a new narrative? It's
How do we show this person's full story or what they left
Yeah.
out? And
we're going to develop a new cast and a new setting and write that in a compelling way.
wow. I mean, that sounds like such a fun
Yeah.
job.
It is very fun. That's why I love it. You
And
know,
and rewarding
and
when
you get
like
to learn about random stuff like, gunshot residue particles and stuff you
Yeah.
would never think that would be.
yeah. Which also,
so
if you had
it's-
said you get to learn about gunshot residue particles prior to this
that's funny.
conversation,
Yeah, I
I
guess
would have
that's
been
not
like,
the best selling point.
woohoo.
No, let me
No,
leave
but
that
it
out of
was
the interview.
really
Yeah.
fascinating. It is like
Um,
there's so much more to it.
but brain science and stuff, right? You have to
Dude, I'm
become
obsessed with
experts in. Me too.
neuroscience, don't get me
Neuroscience.
started.
I know. Me too.
Dude,
Same.
I'll change these pathways all day.
The neuroplasticity is a huge part of what we do in the death penalty world because
Oh, I bet, 'cause
those
Showing
from
that,
0
like,
to 4 is when attachment theory is. That's when all those pathways really get set in.
that's so
and if
true.
you're neglected or abused during that period of time, your whole life trajectory is different.
Also, do you know about this? Is such a side tangent, but just because I love attachment theory and I like love learning about that and like
Mm-hmm.
the things that like can help you rewire and how like everyone's
Yeah.
like mantras are corny. It's like no, but it helps. Like, do you know to be securely attached? And if you don't know this, I don't mean to scare you as a parent. 30%. A parent had to get it right 30% of the time for secure attachment. And I think about that as someone who's very much not securely attached.
Yeah.
And I go like, you guys didn't even get it right 30% of the time.
I had not heard that statistic.
I just
but
heard it in some.
I do. I was way
Psychology
too
book I read for
aware
fun.
when my daughter was 0 to 4 of how important those years were.
You're like, she's crying.
for her
I show up.
security.
I'm-
Exactly.
Attachment. Wish you. And
Show up. Yes.
as Angelina's falling asleep on the toilet, and you're like,
Totally.
her attachment style. And what?
Exactly. So yes, that is all real.
That's
But learning about that stuff is fun because that's what we do. In
well,
death
you bring that
penalty
into the
cases.
case to go like, well, based on science and research, here's why this, it doesn't make it right,
Yeah.
but here's why this person's actions, like as you said before, they're impulse control, they're like
Yeah.
emotional regulation.
And how about lead poisoning? I have another case where we brought in an urban planner expert because he grew up here in the Rampart area of Los Angeles where there were oil rigs and shit and benzene and lead used in the paint in these
Buildings
houses that were for people who weren't wealthy. And what's that do to you? And that
Telling me the government's not trying to kill the poor people?
it's crazy though. There's a lot of people were exposed to lead.
And you're like, and that does,
That causes
there's research.
issues. Yeah,
it
exactly.
It can really mess
Yeah.
with you.
And again, I think it's really important that we're not saying it's not a Twinkie defense of
and therefore,
therefore that excuses you let them out, get out of jail free card.
yeah,
But
get out there and kill somebody else.
It gives them it makes them not
Perspective.
Hannibal.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you go, yeah. Do you know about Dr. Aiman?
No.
Oh man, well this is a whole tangent for another time, but you should look into him. He's a psychologist, but his whole thing, and he's been doing it for maybe like 20 years. He's got these clinics that, of course, don't take insurance and are insanely overpriced and
Mhm.
works with the wealthy, which is fine. But like they do like brain scans, and he's like
Yeah.
on the forefront of that with psychologists because his whole thing is like, yeah, I got into it, and he had previously been in medical imaging, and he's like, sorry, we're just diagnosing people, and we're not like looking at their brains, and a lot of the things that they've done like hundreds of thousands of imaging and like that you can see in someone's brain that like people who are like school shooters, they all like a lot of them have like a tumor, like a
Shrunken-
fucking
Or
there's, like-
shrunken amygdala. Yeah.
yeah, and like and an ADHD brain where it's like it's actually like it.
Yeah.
And he's like
We call that organic brain damage. So one thing we do for all death row clients, we usually as standard is get a neuropsychological examination,
wow,
which combines those two things, which is looking at the psychology, but also whether there's evidence of an organic
like
brain,
a physical brain.
physical, and that's really impactful.
So you know a brain scan guy.
Totally, we use brain scans a lot if we
Yeah,
can.
I'm just kidding. I'm just trying to get free
I know.
brain scans. I'll pretend to be a
Yeah.
criminal for a free
But
brain.
that's a
scan.
huge part of the work is
Well-
that kind of evidence.
Well, because that's important to go like,
Totally.
yeah, no, this person shouldn't be out and
Yeah.
about, but like, yeah, they're not totally.
And getting people to believe that it's a real. So many people don't really believe in that
I mean, there's
psychology
people who
is a real
don't believe
science.
in depression. I had a guy say that to me, and I was like, "What has your life
Jeez,
been
really?
that you don't believe in depression?"
Wow.
I believe in
Yeah,
it.
I had a case where the guys had 7 tours in Vietnam, and was in charge of like extracting the dead bodies and was just exposed to the worst stuff you can
That
imagine in
warps
war.
your brain forever.
And the prosecution's argument was that PTSD is not a real thing. Like, you shouldn't listen to that diagnosis.
That's crazy.
And I mean, this was back in the 80s when the trial happened. But like, we all know that's
Nah.
completely. But psychology gets this bad rap because it wasn't tethered to stuff you could see.
Yeah, and they're
so
finally
it's great that they're actually doing something.
Yeah, I love that they're like showing imaging because
Yeah.
well, obviously it was already going on, but like for years I've
Yeah.
always been like, yeah, of course, like people have mental health. I have mental health issues,
Yeah.
but like you can tell me what pill I need without looking at the problem, and I came up from that angle of
The
like, don't try to
frontier.
give me pills, but
You can edit this out. The frontier is consciousness. Is like, what is consciousness?
yeah, I
Because
mean
that
that's
like qualia, like where does that? Nobody knows the answer to that with brain scanning or anything else. Like where that comes from.
yeah, it's like our
Like,
awareness. How do you see
How do you
that
know? Like
in-
what is that? Is it just our brain sort of fabricating it, or is it?
Is there something more?
Yeah,
like this
fascinating.
universal connection.
Fascinating.
Oh, yeah, no, I could go on forever.
If you have, I will listen to this. If you have someone on who knows,
I would.
knows
I mean, I
something
would love
about
to
it.
get on
Yeah.
like a conscious.
It'd be
That's
great.
actually. I'm glad you said that because that is a good like note for me to make to look into someone like that. While I have my free LinkedIn premium trial, stalk people on LinkedIn. They offered me a free
That's
month, and I
awesome.
was like, I'm gonna start. I'm
I'm
gonna get
taking this.
emails.
That's so funny. No one will know.
Okay, these are just some like
Sorry.
silly sort of you're a lawyer, probably generic. I think questions people have or like thought stereotypes. I remember at some point I wanted to be a lawyer in my youth.
You'd make a good one. You intuitively you. Are
Well, I think you
getting
have
this
to be
stuff.
able to like look at all the evidence, and not to say, but like, it's sometimes felt inhibiting in my life that like I won't really take a strong stance on a lot of things because I could argue my own opinion out. Like I could be like, well, I guess if I look at it like this, I could see. And
I'm
that's-
exactly that way.
Yeah. Well, okay. So first of all, as a lawyer who is a husband, and I
Uh-huh.
imagine all relationships, sometimes you get into. We all have our little tussles,
Yep.
we'll get into arguments. Are you like a master arguer with?
It's
or does your wife ever go like, "Don't
cross-
you lawyer me?
that's exactly cross-examination makes for a bad relationship.
Clock out."
Like I am tempted sometimes to want to engage in setting up a cross-examination of, well, so tell me about this, and then it's this.
I
Oh, but
noticed that you-
therefore it didn't work out. That is not going to be helpful to solving things. So I've had to let that go.
You're like, that's for work.
Exactly. And you know why I love the type of law I do is the way we win cases is by talking to just normal people and
Yeah.
taking off the lawyer hat and
Yeah.
getting people to open up about the worst shit in their lives.
Do you actually think that's has somehow like helped you as a partner
that
to be like,
that part of it has
let me see your story?
just listening
Yeah.
and empathizing and not trying to be a lawyer and object
And-
because my impulse is to cut to the chase, get
Find
me
the
the
facts.
answer,
Get the.
find the facts, and substitute my thinking for theirs. And I've had to very consciously in my job step back from that so that I could get folks to open up
And go like, let me just listen.
let
to
me
who this
just
person
like
really is
let
and
this
what they're-
breathe and try to be a better person. It's gonna win my case if I can do that, and that's I think helpful in relationships.
Yeah.
right?
Did you ever
Um,
get people? The only reason I said the thing about, I mean, literally as a youth, I was like, I'll be a lawyer. But my whole family, which, by the way, not a bunch of people who are more accomplished than lawyers. Like, they're all working and fine.
You'd be,
but
I don't know.
a weird bunch to all turn their nose up at the idea of law. You know,
Yeah.
like it's like, okay, well, sorry that I don't want to just be a secretary. I don't know what to tell you, but like, they would sort of give me this like jonesing, ribbing, like, lawyer, what are you liar? You're a scumbag.
My family did the same thing to me. No lawyers in my family. There's one who is a terrible human being in our family who's a lawyer.
And doesn't help.
And
It's
does
like,
it, he's a terrible, he's an awful, like, we can't stand the guy. And so my dad was like, what are you doing? You want to be
"You
the
wanna be
guy who
like this?"
kicks out old people from apartments and stuff? Like,
And you're like, no.
that's not what I want to do. But so, no, I get that all the time from family and
Does being in
pre-law
the
school friends.
oh yeah,
You know, it's
have
like,
fun.
and it's some of it when I went into the work of representing serial killers. You know, It's
Yeah.
like, what
So
are
are
you doing?
people like now? Yeah, oh yeah. I mean,
Um,
when you initially tell people what you do, are they like, oh,
Here in California,
You're
it's
trying
been
to free.
it's been okay. I mean, I did get some of that. I would, especially when I moved to LA and I was go with Angelina to some of these entertainment parties.
Yeah. And people are like, what do you? Oh, and everyone goes, what do
What
you
do you
do?
That's the question. I had a whole conversation with someone at it was like a bar club in West Hollywood when I first moved down, and I thought it was a whole conversation about what I do. And the whole time I didn't get to the end. They mentioned Suge Knight. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Oh, Suge Knight.
Suge Knight. Thank you. And I realized
adorable.
he thought the whole time I was talking about Death Row Records. He thought I was an entertainment lawyer talking about the record company. I'm like, what the fuck?
I work with people on death row. Oh,
yeah.
I got a mixtape.
And wasn't listening to like the substance of what I said at all. I have there's something you can do for me, but no, but I do. I got some questions.
That's the most LA thing I've ever heard,
It's
and
amazing.
that's so funny.
But I do get a lot of like, well, what do you do when you know they're guilty? How do you help them? And it's like, do you represent people who do like child molesters? I'm like, I have, yeah. And how do you help them? That's the big thing I get a lot.
Is that how do you?
Get law students asking me that all the time.
I mean, how do you separate your emotions? Like, is there work you do, or is it just like a resilience you build if you have to work with someone who you're like, they've done something that you think is pretty bad?
Yeah, I really try to put myself in the shoes of what it's like for the victims' families and
Yeah.
what it's right for, and feel that a little bit,
Yeah.
and say like, okay, this is really awful, and just that's going to make me a better advocate. But really, it's what I view my job as finding. Okay, I know you might have done this horrible thing. Let's assume you did.
Yeah.
Maybe you didn't, but assume you did. Let me find it comes from a real deep belief I have that everybody has some intrinsic value and dignity in them.
That like,
and everybody,
it's
even
not just that you're a terrible
even
person.
Hannibal, even the worst of the worst.
Yeah, it's like there's something
There's
in there.
something in there that makes you valuable as a human being. I'm gonna find that and pull that out.
It at least explains that you didn't just do this.
Yeah, or
out
maybe
of
not
pure evil.
explains it, even if it does. There's something in there.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna fight for that. And I'm not responsible. Part of it, I can sort of say I'm not the one who's gonna open the jail doors and let you out. I'm trying to expose. It's very hard. The law is very slanted against overturning convictions.
Oh yeah, because they're like,
Finality. It's like we need.
we
to
are
move
not going to
on.
admit we did something wrong.
So
this
it's
is America.
Yeah. So my job is really.
Have you guys
just
seen
to-
Oppenheimer? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, someone's really. So I don't have that. I really don't have that. Now I don't have it at all because it's with the Innocence Project.
Yeah.
But as a public defender, let me find this, and this is my role.
Yeah, and let me just. Stick
And
to
that
my
brings. I
role.
think that brings a lot of joy to me, and where the heaviness of
being
it
able to
all.
find some nugget of.
Yeah.
Well, here's one thing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's. I mean, that's.
But
fucking
I'm sure it's
rad.
causing me some shit that's gonna
You're
come
like,
up
it's
when
yeah.
I'm older.
I'm
like. That's why you have so many
some
lawyers who
physical
do
body
drugs
pain,
and drink a lot because you can. It's easy to the
coping.
incentive is to compartmentalize and to shut it off. And I need something to shut it off.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, that's why people who have
That's why you do drugs and stuff.
other trauma do that. Yeah, that it's like.
So it's important to talk about it and be open about it and work with people who are open to talking about it.
Yeah, because then you at least have that outlet of
Yeah.
connecting and
And
someone who understands the work.
Not feeling ashamed at feeling bad about the crime or getting
Sure.
pissed off at your client or whatever it is.
Yeah,
Like,
when I imagine being in an environment with other people who are doing it, you sort of
Yeah.
have this community of people who can also like if you get in a moment where you're like,
Mhm.
that I don't feel great about that we did the X, Y, or I did this or whatever. Or if you have those, you're surrounded by a community of people who can remind you of like, but here's the purpose and here's like the
Exactly. And I'm not alone and I'm not failing at what I'm doing by
No.
having these emotions.
you're
And
human.
where it intersects a little bit with, I don't know, tell me I'm being ignorant, but with stand-up comedy and what I've observed and is we actually brought in improv coaches to train us in our work
That's so funny.
to help us understand who our authentic selves are and what our voice is.
That's so funny.
And this guy came in with like a whole improv teacher to like talk about like I'm not going to be the alpha male type, and it takes a lot to get to a point where I can go into trial, and I had a jury trial, and I'm not going to sort of stamp around like the alpha male.
yeah.
I got to be myself, and that's what makes me healthy and
Yeah, and able to do what you do.
compelling and authentic, and
I
not
love that.
damaged just
Well-
by finding like what's my voice and who am I, not trying to be someone else.
Yeah.
So much of being a lawyer is the incentive is to try to be someone else.
Try to be this like
Yeah.
edgy.
Have you ever been on a
hard.
law school campus?
I mean,
The guys, I remember starting.
yeah,
law
I tried to
school.
find a husband once. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, they're just act
Loitering
like they
around a
know
campus.
everything, and it's all a mask, and it's just
yeah, everyone's trying to be the smartest and the like.
and the lawyer who's the the big dog, but you can be a meek, quiet, sensitive person and be a powerhouse trial lawyer and advocate.
Great lawyer. Yeah.
It's just finding that.
And being true to that's so interesting with an improv.
And
group
improv
comedy.
helped us,
Helps you
find
get
that
present,
story.
too.
Yeah, be present and find the story and find ourselves in the story.
I love that. And I mean, that is relatable with comedy because, like, the comedians who end up shining or, in my opinion, like, stick out, it is like there's a level of authenticity that, like, you can, like, you see through when someone's faking
Vulnerability.
It. Yeah.
You,
'Cause there's people who will, like, I've seen people who are naturally dirty try to be clean. I've seen people who don't really curse, but they're new to comedy. They think, oh, that's what's funny. And, like, you can tell that it's not authentic.
It's uncomfortable. Yeah.
And yet it's like the vulnerability, the authenticity, and also it is like, instead of viewing something as like damage, it's like, no, you're built differently, and this is the way you're built has made you great for this.
And you're proud of it.
Thing.
Mhm.
It's why you can do what you can do, and
Mhm.
it's not. It's also the idea of being damaged so often is we're comparing ourselves to a made up person that
Sample
never
size,
existed. That
exactly.
they were like, well, no one's like this. It's like, actually, everyone is.
Yeah.
Or like, it's not weird that you do that. The amount of things that I've been like, this is crazy or weird, and realize as I got older, it's like, no,
I know.
that's very normal.
I have to remind myself of that in traffic. I'm like, let me not hate this person. They're going through some shit in their lives, you know?
Man,
Yeah.
I can tell when I haven't been meditating when I'm in traffic. I'm like, dude, boy, do I feel good on days where someone can cut me off, and I go like, I hope they get where they need to be. Versus like, you son of a bitch.
I'm not there yet, but I'm getting there.
I'm when I say days, I mean one time I had a day where it happened, and I was like, I guess I'm enlightened now.
That's it. There we go. That's amazing. If you can get to that moment.
And
yeah.
then it never came back. All right. Before we wrap up, we mentioned like at the top, like I sort of joked about, oh, Kim Kardashian, but like some people might know, like we've seen Kim Kardashian in the press over the last couple of years, sort of being this like voice for
Champion
the innocent.
yeah.
How has that helped you guys?
It's we will take it. Not just her specifically, but podcasts like Serial and what are some of the other shows? Making of a Murder.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
a number of them that have been huge for the innocence movement and for just exposing wrongful convictions generally, because the big impediment for our work is this belief that, and I call it's like a myth of infallibility is what I teach my students.
Wow.
That if everybody in the system plays their part, the jury gets it right. That's the assumption of our adversarial systems. The prosecution plays by the rules. The defense plays by the rules.
then they'll get it exactly right.
The truth emerges from this process.
Yeah.
And what pop culture discussing this and what Kim Kardashian taking the lead on and exposing this to a new group of people has done, and what frankly the protest movements that came out of the killings of all these unarmed black men have helped expose is, look, there is over policing. Police lie.
Yeah. It turns out not everyone is getting it right.
Not everyone is giving it, and not only that, sometimes jurors just get it wrong, and sometimes innocent people get convicted. And that was a really hard thing for judges to accept and for jurors to accept.
Because I think most people want to feel like I did my civic duty, and then going, I really tried to help, and I put a man.
That's right. And
I mean,
so,
I can't imagine being a juror that was on a case of.
And we talked to them. We try to talk to the jurors after the fact and be like, look at this evidence we found. What do you think about this? You know,
Is the Project for Innocence? Do they have a podcast?
No.
They should.
We should. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, maybe you can.
I'm gonna come host.
Yeah. But no, that has helped get the public willing to accept that these wrongful convictions really do happen. Sometimes it's just through no fault of anybody's. New shit emerges.
Well, I think acceptance is so much of like a giant first step, because, I mean, it's the same as like, it's not the same, but, you know, growing up and one day realizing like, oh, my parents were just people, or like, oh, my teacher didn't know everything, or like, just
so true. And now how do we move from here?
And it can be like an ego mindfuck for a second of you having to go like, no, because people want to know, no, I was told that I can trust my government, and the judicial system has my back, and then going, oh, they might fuck up.
And I'm not some counter-revolutionary dude, but I've come to see like, no, the system is really fucking broken and racist, and
Yeah.
can't avoid it. But what it's done is it's allowed for the election of progressive DAs because
Which
the
is
public is
great.
praying for it. You know,
Yeah, now they're if
Mr. Gascon has done a lot of good.
and if people are seeing it now, they're like, who do I get in there?
Yes, exactly. We can elect folks, and the legislature, as I mentioned, has I don't know if call it political will and ability to help change the law for the better. It hasn't helped at the federal level yet,
But well, you know,
but at the local level, it's been huge to
you
have.
just make the small rumbles and hopefully
Yeah, so
it
I'm
all
all for Kim Kardashian doing her thing. I think the NBA does an Innocence thing.
get as much spotlight as you can to
on
like
on these convictions, and people like my client Barry, and hearing from them, because they're extraordinary people to go through that process. So
yeah, that's incredible. Well, thank you for sitting down with me. If people want to learn more about the Innocence Project, how to donate, how to get involved, how can they find that?
yeah, we have a Twitter account. We have
Oh.
an Instagram now. We're getting ourselves more in the public.
Look at these hip
Um,
lawyers getting out there on
I
the
know
internet.
it's a little bit cringe, as my daughter would tell me, but we're trying. But we have a website, and you can just go to it's Loyola Law School Project for the Innocent. We are always looking for. Sometimes we have volunteer events where people from the community can help read letters and help us
Ooh.
at least take that initial step
Oh, I like
of,
that.
of
I
sending them a
volunteer.
questionnaire.
Okay.
But donations are really big because it allows us to afford forensic experts, for example, to
Yeah.
review a conviction. It allows us to afford a new lawyer or an investigator to go out on the streets and actually talk to these people.
Oh, that's
So there's a
incredible.
number of different ways that
Do you guys do
folks can
fundraising
help.
events too?
Yeah, fundraising is baked into what we're doing.
Just
It's
all of it,
Wrongful
constantly.
Conviction Day on October 2nd. We're having the panel of my client Barry Williams, another gentleman, Gary Tyler, who spent 40 years on death row in Louisiana, is going to talk. That's going to be at Loyola Law School at noon. There's always a fundraising component
Okay.
to
Perfect.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, you guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and go donate, go volunteer, and we'll see you next time.